The dim street lights outside cast long shadows into the apartment. Inside, Sarah sat at the dining table, staring at her phone. Her boyfriend, Daniel, was late. Tonight was supposed to be special, Valentine's Day. They had been dating for over a year, and Daniel had always treated her well. He sent flowers to her office earlier that day and promised a romantic dinner at home. But now, she was alone, waiting. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel, I'm sorry, babe. Something came up at work. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Sarah sighed. Something about his text felt off. He had been acting strange lately, distant, secretive. He would disappear at odd hours, always saying he had important work. But whenever she asked what he did, he would change the subject. She shook off the uneasy feeling and stood up, adjusting the candles on the table. The room smelled like roses, mixed with the scent of the steak she had cooked for their dinner. Everything looked perfect. Then, ding dong. The doorbell rang. Sarah's heart jumped. Was it Daniel? She hurried to open the door. But instead of Daniel, a delivery man stood there, holding a large box. "Are you Sarah Parker?" the man asked, looking nervous. "Yes," she said. "This is for you. A Valentine's gift from a friend." Sarah hesitated but took the box. Before she could ask any questions, the delivery man turned and walked away quickly. She stared at the package. It was heavy. Cold. A bad feeling crept up her spine. Carefully, she placed the box on the dining table and grabbed a knife to cut the tape. She pulled open the flaps and froze. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was something horrifying. A human arm. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The pale, lifeless hand was stiff, fingers curled slightly, as if frozen in time. Blood had soaked through the plastic, pooling at the bottom of the box. Her body trembled as she stepped back, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Then her phone buzzed again. "Daniel, I need you to trust me. Please don't open that box. I'll explain everything when I get there." Sarah felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. Trust him? She turned back to the box, her stomach twisting. She had spent over a year with Daniel. Kissed him. Slept next to him. And now, there was a human arm in her apartment. A loud bang made her jump. The door swung open. Daniel stood there, his face pale, his eyes wild with panic. "Sarah," he gasped. "Why did you open it?" Sarah backed away. "What is this, Daniel?" Her voice shook. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel shut the door behind him and ran a hand through his hair. He looked scared. But not scared for her. Scared for himself. "You don't understand," he said. "You weren't supposed to see this." Sarah felt like she was in a nightmare. "See what? That you're a killer? That you," she pointed at the box, "cut people up?" Daniel stepped forward. "It's not like that. I had no choice. There are people I work for, dangerous people. They needed parts." Sarah's stomach turned. "Parts? You mean human body parts?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes." A wave of nausea hit her. She had been dating a monster. She reached for her phone. "I'm calling the police." Daniel lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. "No." His grip tightened. "You don't understand, Sarah. If you do that, we're both dead." Tears burned her eyes. "Let go of me." Daniel's expression softened. "I love you, Sarah. I didn't want you to find out like this." She yanked her hand away, heart racing. "Get out. Now." Daniel looked like he was about to say something when... Bam! The apartment door burst open. Sarah screamed as 3 masked men rushed inside. They carried weapons, knives, ropes, something that looked like a syringe. One of them, a tall man in a black hoodie, pointed at Daniel. "You messed up." Daniel paled. "Please, I can fix this." "You had a job to do," the man said coldly. His gaze shifted to Sarah. "And now you got her involved." Sarah's breath came in fast, shallow gasps. "Please, I don't know anything." The man ignored her. He nodded to one of his men. Everything happened too fast. A hand grabbed Sarah's hair from behind. She screamed, but a cold needle pierced her neck. A burning sensation rushed through her veins. Her vision blurred. She felt herself falling. Falling. Darkness. Sarah woke up in a dimly lit room. Her arms and legs were tied to a cold steel table. The smell of blood filled the air. A shadow moved in the corner. "You're lucky you're still breathing," a deep voice said. Sarah's heart pounded. Then the door creaked open, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. A tray filled with scalpels, saws, and surgical tools. And beside it, Daniel. Watching her. The room was freezing. The sharp scent of metal and disinfectant mixed with something worse, blood. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. A dull pain throbbed in her head. She tried to move, but her wrists and ankles were tied down to a steel table. Panic rushed through her. Where am I? Her breathing quickened. The dim light above flickered, casting eerie shadows. She turned her head slightly and froze. Daniel stood across the room, his face half hidden in shadow. His once soft brown eyes were cold. Beside him, a metal tray gleamed under the light, scalpels, saws, surgical tools. Sarah's stomach twisted. What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Daniel sighed and took a step closer. "Sarah. I need you to listen." She yanked at the restraints, but they didn't budge. "Let me go." "Daniel, please." "I don't want to do this," he interrupted, his voice eerily calm. "But I have no choice." Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. "No choice? You kidnapped me, tied me to a table, and you're standing there with a tray of knives. What the hell do you mean, no choice?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You don't understand the kind of people I work for. The kind of business I'm in." Sarah swallowed hard. "You sell human body parts." The words tasted like poison in her mouth. Daniel flinched but didn't deny it. Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. "How long have you been doing this?" He hesitated. "A few years." Sarah's stomach churned. She had slept beside this man. Loved him. Trusted him. "How many people have you killed?" she asked, barely a whisper. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not as many as you think." Sarah's breath hitched. "So at least one?" Silence. Her heart plummeted. She yanked at the straps again, this time harder. "You sick bastard. Let me go, Daniel." Daniel took a deep breath and turned to the masked man in the corner. "We don't have to do this. She doesn't have to die." The masked man chuckled. "You're getting soft, Daniel." He picked up a syringe. "That's not how this works." Sarah's eyes widened. "No. No, please." The man stepped forward. Daniel blocked him. "Give me time," Daniel said. "I'll take care of her myself." The man stared at him. Then smirked. "You've got 1 hour." With that, he left the room, locking the heavy metal door behind him. Sarah's chest heaved. "Daniel," she begged. "You don't have to do this. We can run. We can go to the police." Daniel's face darkened. "The police? You think I'd still be breathing if that was an option?" Sarah's lip trembled. "Then why did you get involved in this?" Daniel exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It started small. Just helping someone get rid of things." He hesitated. "Then I got deeper. Owed money to the wrong people." Sarah's breathing hitched. "So now you murder people?" Daniel slammed his fist against the table. "I don't just go around killing people, Sarah. It's not like that." Sarah flinched. The man she loved was gone. Daniel looked away. "I thought I could keep you out of this. I really did." Sarah's voice broke. "Then let me go." He was silent for a long time. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. Daniel leaned over her, his hand brushing against the strap on her wrist. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Sarah opened her mouth to thank him. Then something cold pressed against her neck. A knife. Daniel's fingers trembled around the handle. His eyes were distant, haunted. "I have to do this," he muttered. Sarah's blood ran cold. She screamed and bucked against the restraints. "No! Daniel, please. Please don't do this." His grip on the knife tightened. His breathing was shaky. Then, bang! The metal door flew open. The masked man stormed in, gun raised. "You had your chance, Daniel." Daniel turned. "Wait." Bang! A gunshot rang out. Daniel collapsed to the ground. Sarah screamed. Blood pooled around Daniel's body. His eyes widened, staring at the ceiling in shock. He reached for Sarah, his fingers barely brushing hers. Then his hand fell limp. The masked man looked at Sarah and smirked. "Guess it's your turn now." He stepped closer, raising the syringe. Sarah thrashed, kicking and twisting. "No. Please, don't." Then, a loud siren blared from outside. Shouting. Heavy boots thudding against the floor. "Police." The masked man cursed. "Shit." He spun on his heels and bolted out of the room. Sarah's heart pounded. Footsteps approached. The door burst open. A uniformed officer rushed in. Sarah gasped, sobbing in relief. Then, she felt her wrist restraints loosen. She was free. As strong hands pulled her up, she glanced down at Daniel's lifeless body. Her vision blurred with tears. The man she thought she loved. The man she almost died for. And now, he is gone. Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. A detective approached. "Miss Parker, I have something you need to know." Sarah blinked up at him. "What?" The detective's face was grim. Daniel wasn't the leader. He was just another pawn. Sarah's heart stopped. The detective handed her a file. Inside were photos, surveillance footage. Sarah's blood turned to ice. One of the masked men from the warehouse was standing outside her apartment. Watching her. Waiting. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue against the cold city streets. Sarah sat in the back, still trembling, clutching the blanket around her. Her mind raced through everything that had happened, the box, the knife, Daniel's lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. She had escaped. But something was wrong. The detective knelt beside her, holding the surveillance photos. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice serious, "we've been tracking this group for months. Daniel wasn't in charge. He was just a middleman." Sarah swallowed hard. "Then who is?" The detective hesitated before flipping to the last photo. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The masked man from the warehouse, the one who shot Daniel, was standing outside her apartment. Watching her. Her fingers dug into the blanket. "You're saying he's still out there?" The detective nodded. "We believe he's the real leader of this operation." Sarah's stomach twisted. The nightmare wasn't over. They took her to a safe house, a quiet motel far from the city. Officers patrolled outside, and the detective assured her that she was protected. But Sarah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face. His hands gripping the knife. The way his fingers trembled before he died. Despite everything, a part of her mourned him. She sat on the edge of the motel bed, rubbing her temples. What if Daniel had let her go? Would he still be alive? A knock at the door made her jump. "It's just me," the detective called. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door. He stepped inside, holding a file. "We found something else." He set the file on the table. Sarah hesitated before opening it. Inside were police reports. Names. Photos of missing people. All tied to Daniel's group. Then she saw it. A list of clients. Rich businessmen. Politicians. Doctors. People who had been buying body parts from the organization. Her hands trembled. "These people, they knew," she whispered. The detective nodded. "Some of them paid thousands for organs on the black market. Some needed transplants, others, he trailed off, jaw tightening. Some just enjoyed the violence. Sarah's stomach turned. We have enough evidence to bring them down, the detective continued. But there's one problem. Sarah looked up. What? He exhaled. The leader is still missing. Sarah's heartbeat pounded in her ears. The man from the warehouse, the detective said. We don't know his real name, but we call him the butcher. Sarah shivered. Why? The detective's face darkened. Because he doesn't just sell body parts. He enjoys cutting them himself. Sarah's blood ran cold. Later that night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, too quiet. Something felt off. Then, a shadow moved outside her window. Sarah's breath hitched. She sat up, heart hammering. The curtains fluttered. The air shifted. She wasn't alone. Then she saw it. A figure in the doorway. A man in a mask. Sarah screamed. The masked man lunged at her, but she rolled off the bed, crashing onto the floor. The lamp shattered beside her. Thought you could escape? The man growled. His voice was low, calm. Sarah scrambled backward. Please. He pulled a knife from his belt. The same kind Daniel had held to her throat. Daniel was weak, the man said, stepping closer. But I'm not. Sarah's pulse pounded. She had to run. She grabbed the broken lamp and swung it. It smashed into the man's arm, making him stumble back. She bolted for the door, yanking it open. A second man stood outside. Sarah's heart stopped. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her back inside. She kicked, screamed, fought, but the two men overpowered her. Shoo, the butcher whispered. I only need a few parts. Tears blurred Sarah's vision. This was it. She was going to die. Then, boom. The door burst open. Gunshots rang out. Sarah hit the ground as police officers stormed the room. The butcher spun around, firing his own gun. The officers fired back. Sarah crawled under the bed as bullets ripped through the air. Then, silence. She peeked out, her breath shaky. The butcher lay on the floor, bleeding out. His mask had fallen off, revealing a scarred face with cold, dead eyes. The second man had already been taken down by the police. Sarah's whole body shook. She was alive. Days later, Sarah sat in a courtroom. The trial moved quickly. The butcher had been involved in over 30 murders. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah watched as the judge read the sentence. For the crimes of kidnapping, murder, and organ trafficking, the court hereby sentences the defendant to death by hanging. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. It was over. As the butcher was led away, he turned to her, his lips curling into a smirk. I'll see you in hell. Sarah held his gaze. No, she said, voice steady. You'll be going there alone. And with that, the guards dragged him away. Sarah stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. For the first time in months, she felt free. The nightmare was over. But she would never forget. The end.